Who knows what Jay-Z, J.K. Rowling, Bill Gates and Oprah Winfrey all have in common? Okay, I will tell you then. They have all overcome failure in one shape or form to go on to gain success in their respective careers. Welcome to My Perfect Failure. Join us as we delve into the world of our perfect failures. We will interview, explore, and discuss how our perfect failures can lead us to success. Join us and tune in.
Welcome everybody to another episode of My Perfect Failure. Today I'm super excited because I have another guest for you. I have another wonderful guest for you even. So my guest today is a successful corporate executive, entrepreneur, award-winning author, motivational speaker and consultant and much more, which you're going to find out shortly. But he's a founder of an educational non-profit. As a frequent guest speaker, he has been living and working alongside Trappist monks of Meakin Abbey since 1996. After a corporate career with companies such as MTV, he founded two highly successful software businesses. He has published many popular leadership articles for Forbes and has been featured in the Wall Street Journal, Fast Company, Selling Magazine, and the New York Times and Business Week. He's also the author of the new book, Not Less Than Everything, One Man's Quest for Spiritual Enlightenment. So a very, very, very warm welcome to My Perfect Failure, August Turak. How are you?
Hey, thank you very much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Well, I'm really excited because we were just having an amazing conversation. I was thinking we just need the record button now because I want to capture everything that you were saying to me. So yeah, really excited to meet you and to have you on the podcast. I think your journey, everything that you have done and are doing, really fits the narrative of why I put this podcast together. So I'm excited to dig in. What I wanted to start with initially, so you've got a wonderful, you mentioned prior to me hitting the record button, this entrepreneurial background. But what I wanted to kind of ask you is, when you were a child, was business something that was uppermost in your thoughts?
No, nothing. I never thought about business at all. I was a very dreamy, romantic boy. I wanted to be a hero. I wanted to be Julius Caesar. I wanted to be a great man. I wanted to be, just romantic. I wanted to be a knight in shining armor.
Yeah.
I wanted to be a mythological kind of hero. So I started reading voraciously when I was in third grade, and I read almost every single day. And I was always reading books about great warriors or great mythical figures or stuff like that. Never crossed my mind. Business was not even remotely. I was a Russian history major in college, for example.
Oh, cool. So
And by the way, we should have to come back to that because the reason why I was able to sell my companies in 1998 was because of my Russian history background. And all of my life, from the time I was 18 years old, what are you going to do with this Russian history? What made me into Russian history made me into a multimillionaire. So
did you ring up all those people that questioned you about why you're doing this, why you majoring in Russian?
Yeah. Well,
this is why.
Well, yeah. I mean, I decided when I was 18 years old, I got interested in the mysteries of life. What I wanted to know most of all, what is the life worth living? You have to remember, this is the late 60s and early 70s. And we were all, many young people at the time were vexed by there's got to be more to life than ending up living in a white picket fence house with 3.2 children, with a 2-year-old car and a 30-year mortgage. How do you end up not being, I didn't want to end up at 65 years old saying, what happened to my life? How did I blow it? I've put this on Facebook a couple of times. I said I was haunted as a very young man with the certainty of just how easy it would be to blow it, to waste my life.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to waste my life. So then when I was in college, I started asking the question, what is it's Plato's question, I found out later. What is the life, Socrates? What is the life worth living? What is the life well lived? And I decided to forget all ideas of career when I was in college. And I was just going to take classes that I thought would help me answer these questions. So I took philosophy and history and English, and I read great novels, and I just did everything I could do. And from that very beginning, I started seeking out people that I thought were wiser than me to help answer these questions that I had. And when I look back over my life, everything that you mentioned, my MTV and being an entrepreneur and a successful author and award-winning author and all of this flowed as a byproduct of that decision that I made as a very, very young man, to live my life for a higher purpose, for higher values. Um, this guided me throughout my life, and um, so I never had any great. Even people say to me, "How did when did you decide you want to be a writer?" I didn't decide I wanted to be a writer. Some college kids talked me into entering the
I love
Templeton.
this story, by the way. My
Yes,
research took me onto this, so please,
yeah,
do go on.
I was mentoring college students. I was working as a volunteer, helping college kids answer spiritual questions on a volunteer basis. And my students said to me, you got to enter this contest. And I looked up the contest. It was an essay contest in 3,500 words or less. Answer the question, what is the purpose of life? And I said to these kids, I never written anything for my life except college papers and business stuff, business plans. No, no, no. You've always told us to go for it. You got to go for it. You got to do it. And so I looked, and I only had like a week, and the contest had been going on for almost 2 years. It was open to previously published material, um, professional writers, and in 3,500 words or less, I had to answer the question, what is the purpose of life? So I sat down, and I screwed around for a couple of days, wasn't getting anywhere. And one of my college students walks by and he says, how's it going? And I said, terrible. I'm not getting anywhere and I'm running out of time. And he said, why don't you just write up that story about Brother John, the Trappist monk, that incredible encounter you had with him on Christmas Eve? You're always telling us that story. So why don't you? I said, wow, that's a great idea. And I banged it out in like a couple of days. I sent it in right at the deadline. 6 months later, I get a telephone call. You just won $100,000. You're the grand prize.
$100,000.
$100,000 grand prize.
Wow.
10,000 essays from 47 countries were entered in that contest.
How
And I
many,
won
sorry?
10,000 essays from 47 countries. And I won the grand prize with the very first thing I ever tried to write in my life. But I mentioned in my introduction to Not Less Than Everything, One Man's Quest for Spiritual Enlightenment, which is the book that I just released, that I said, my brother Chris, who is an attorney, I have 7 brothers. There's 7 brothers. He's the youngest. I'm the oldest, and he's an attorney. And he said he was talking to one of his attorney friends, and he told him about how I won this contest. He said, "You mean to tell me your brother never wrote anything in his life? He goes up against 10,000 essays and professional writers. He bangs out something over a weekend, and he wins $100,000." And my brother said, "Yeah, that's pretty much the story." And he said, "Boy, is your brother Augie lucky?" And Chris said to him, "No." He said, "My brother Augie's been working on that essay for 35 years."
So
So that essay came out of that decision in college.
yeah,
That I made up my mind that the purpose of my life was going to be the best human being I could possibly be. And of course, at 18, I didn't know what that meant. I didn't know what the definition of the best human being could possibly be. But I decided to go on this quest, to become the best human being I could possibly be. And it led me in a spiritual direction eventually.
So just in terms of what that looks like, are you a seeker? Do you let situations guide you? Do you have to feel? Do you get the right energy? Do you have that knowing about whether you're going to do something or whether maybe you're not going to do something?
I like to look at my whole life as a happy accidents. I got my job at MTV, for example, and everybody, and I was one of the founders of MTV. I was one of the I got hired.
So I want to hear about this. So
I got hired 6 months before MTV even launched. And I would give talks and things like that. And people would say, well, when did you know you wanted to go into the television business? Well, what radio and television program did you study? I said, I had no plans at all to go into the television business. I studied Russian history. I couldn't tell, I didn't know anything about television.
Accident.
It was a happy accident. Everything winning that prize was a happy accident. Selling my company because of my Russian history background was a happy accident.
That sounds like another book to me.
It's already in. It's called Business Secrets of the Trappist Monks.
Okay.
My first book is all about how the Trappist way of life. And so when you live your life for a higher purpose, and I define living it, I see all of life, all of motivation, because in business we're always, how do we motivate people? How do you get, what is the secret to motivating people? And what I talk about in my essay, Brother John, by the way, I turned the essay that won the $100,000 Templeton Prize into an illustrated book. An artist did a bunch of paintings, and it's called Brother John, a Monk, a Pilgrim, and the Purpose of Life.
So
And
just in relation to that, so if we can, because there's so much that I want to kind of unravel
okay,
from your journey. So, Brother John, that was so when your student came to speak to you, he mentioned or she mentioned to you that you were always talking about an encounter that you had with Brother John. What was that
right.
encounter?
The encounter was that I was going through a very, very dark period of my life. The happiest accident of my life, which I talk a lot about in my
Mm.
latest book, Not Less Than Everything, is my Duke students going to go skydiving, and I broke my ankle to smithereens, and it triggered panic attacks and horrible depression, and feel terrible feelings of foreboding. What in spiritual parlance they would call a dark night of the soul. And excuse me, and one of my, I got in the midst of this, I got a telephone call from one of my Duke students saying that he was spending the entire summer at Mepkin Abbey Monastery outside of Charleston, South Carolina, as a monastic guest, which means he would wear a robe just like the monks, get up at 3 a.m, go to church 7 times a day, work in their egg business, and I was really inspired, and I just blurted out, "I want to come." And he said, "When?" And I said, "Right now." And then I realized it was Wednesday, and I was the CEO of my entrepreneur company at that point. I thought, "Not Friday. I'll come Friday." He said, "Okay, let me ask Brother John." And I mentioned in my latest book that was the first time I ever heard Brother John's name. And he said, "Come down this weekend." And some unbelievable things happened. Some basically things I consider to be miraculous almost happened to me that first weekend. And so I kept coming back and back. And then I applied to be a monastic guest, and I went down for like 3 weeks over Christmas. This was 1996. And while I was there on Christmas Eve, the only party they have all year is they have a little party on Christmas Eve after Christmas Eve Mass. Now you got to remember, you get up at 3 o'clock in the morning and you go to bed 8 o'clock at night. But on Christmas Eve, Mass doesn't start until 8. So you don't get out of Mass till about 10. And then you have this party. So you're exhausted because you've already
Mm.
put a day's work in. It's a regular day. So I go to this party. And all you have is some cakes and apple cider and stuff. And I'm exhausted. And I start to walk to the door to walk back to my room. And I realize that the rain is pouring down on the roof. And it's like 38 degrees outside. And I don't have an umbrella, and I'm going to be soaked, and I only have one surplice or habit to wear. So next morning I'll be wearing this wet thing, and I'm just kind of cursing under my breath. And I start to open the door, and the light from the refectory shines out, and there's this shape of this man standing out there. I blink, and it's Brother John, and he's standing under an umbrella. And I said, "Brother John, he didn't have a coat on or anything. It's 38 degrees. It's pouring down rain. He's standing under an umbrella outside, when he should be inside having
Yeah.
the one party a year he's allowed to have." And I said, "What are you doing, Brother John?" He said, "I'm here for people who forgot their umbrellas so I can walk them back to their rooms."
Amazing.
And this set off a tremendous, as we used to say in the 1960s, agonize and reappraisal. How do you become a man like Brother John? How do you become someone so selfless that you would rather stand outside in the rain just in case somebody might need help than enjoy the one party that you're here? And why am I not like that? Why do I live so selfishly the way I live? And that's the germ. And then I come up with the answer, the germ of my essay, Brother John, that won the $100,000 Templeton Prize. But it's this encounter that I had that really, I found it took it so really, really confrontational. I went to see this other monk, Father Christian, and told him about it. And I mentioned this in the essay too. And he says, "So you noticed, did you? Brother John's a saint." First thing he said was, "Brother John's a saint." He said, "John's a saint." He didn't call him brother. He said, "John's a saint. So you noticed, did you?" He said, "It's amazing how many people would take something like that for granted in life." And both in my own personal life, my spiritual life, and in my business life, what I'm always trying to tell people is you have to learn how to notice. It's the things that the most creative people, the most successful people, they notice the things that the rest of us don't notice. They notice the things that the rest of us just kind of take for granted or ignore. And so the fact that I noticed, I've asked Brother John, actually, we've been interviewed together since then, and people will say to him, "Do you remember standing outside in the rain?" No, he doesn't remember that.
Doesn't remember.
Why would he remember? That's the only way he lives. He lives like that
Yeah,
all the
he does
time.
it all the time. So it's his standard behavior. So I guess you'd only remember if you don't if you do it, you've only ever done it once or twice.
Yeah, or exactly, or you just imagine that you might do it.
Yeah. So that process of being selfless, and you mentioned that creative people, successful people have got this skill where they're able to put that into practice. Is that something that can be learned? So for people that are thinking, I want this in my life.
That's a fabulous question. And the answer is no.
Really?
You don't learn it, you become it.
Okay.
So, I say that everyone, if you want to, and I spent as a sales manager and a salesman myself, and then as a sales manager, then a sales director, then a sales vice president, and eventually the CEO of a sales driven company. I spent a lot of time on motivation. And I realized what everybody is really longing for is transformation.
Mm.
All motivation is transformative. An acorn is longing to be transformed into an oak. You don't, can an acorn learn how to be an oak? No, an acorn must become an oak. Every caterpillar is longing to be transformed into a butterfly. Can you teach a caterpillar how to be a butterfly? No, he has to be transformed into a butterfly. And I said, even though everybody is longing for transformation, there's three forms of transformation. When a thirsty man drinks, he transforms his condition. When a poor man hits the lottery, he transforms his circumstances. But when Mr. Scrooge wakes up on Christmas morning in London town, an utterly new man, selfless, he has experienced a transformation of being. And if you want to bring a transformation of being, you got to take the hero's journey. And Aristotle said, we are what we repeatedly do. Excellence is not a choice, it's a habit. You just keep standing out there in the rain under the umbrella. You just keep standing out there. You just keep acting and behaving and behaving. And gradually you're transformed into that butterfly of a selfless person. You can't intellectually just grasp it and say, now that I know it, I'm changed. Intellectual knowledge doesn't change us. What I keep talking about, it's not a change of mind, it's a change of heart.
Okay. Okay. So for you, when you want to have that transformative impact and ultimately become, do you get to the point where you have that vision, that knowing, that area of focus you want to become, but you've got the tools that you know that it's a journey that you just don't, it just doesn't happen. We have to put in the work. We have to.
I learned, yes, I learned that from my very first teacher. I became fascinated by Zen Buddhism when I was in, and I write a lot about him in my new book, Not Less Than Everything. It's a fascinating story of all these crazy Zen teachers and all these magical experiences I had and everything. And he was very much about, if Joseph Campbell talked about the hero's journey. And in my first book, Business Secrets of the Trappist Monks, I use that model that everybody, whether we realize it or not, we are longing to take this hero's journey. And this hero's journey is a journey from selfishness to selflessness. And the proof I use for this is I take Joseph Campbell's model and I demonstrate that it's in all these movies. And we go and flock to these movies and we spend billions and billions of dollars to watch other people be transformed.
Yeah.
And as a marketing person, what's that? We had an expression in business called dollar votes. Don't pay attention to surveys. People will say whatever you want them to say when they're asked. Pay attention to what they spend their money on. If you want to know if people are really going to buy your product, ask them to buy it. Don't ask them, would you buy it? Oh yeah, I'd buy it. Sure, sure. Then you come back later and say, you know what? No, that's all right.
Yeah.
So when I look at what are people buying? They're buying vicarious hero's journey. They go to the movies and they sit in a chair and they take it vicariously. So what are the stages of the hero's journey? And I've compressed them for expediency. The first one is the call. This is vocation. In a religious context, this is where Moses gets called by the burning bush. Moses, Moses, he's called, vocation. And God has a mission for him. In the movies, it's always some washed out old warrior who they want him to come. A car shows up in front of them and says, "Come on, only you. You got to come back into the army because only you can defeat the bad guys. You know, we need you." And so the second stage is resistance to the call. Moses says, "Oh no, I'm not. I can't talk. I can't go to Pharaoh. You got to send my brother Aaron. He's got a better, you know." So there's resistance. And in the movies, all these movies are the same thing. As soon as you say, "Come on, Arnold Schwarzenegger, you got to come back into the get out of here. I wouldn't come back with you sons of bricks." Yeah. But then the hero always reconsiders. And the next stage of the hero's journey, and this is the one that nobody wants to face, is the desert. You go to the desert. In a religious context, that's formation, character building, training. You go and you bust your butt for as long as it takes to learn self-control and discipline and all the virtues that you're going to need. And meanwhile, if you're lucky, you've got Yoda or Morpheus or all these people that we go to the movies screaming at you the whole time. Don't try, do, you know? And we love it. We go to these movies and we eat it up when these teachers are giving these guys such a hard time in the desert. And then the hero finally emerges from the desert. He's got all this power, but now he's tempted. There's a temptation. Is he going to use it for selfish reasons or selfless reasons? And in the case of Darth Vader in the Star Wars, he goes to the dark side. He goes selfish. Michael Corleone in The Godfather, he goes selfish. He gets intoxicated by the power and he can't resist it. So then the hero goes through the death and rebirth. Oh, that's the great trial. When he comes out, he faces the great trial. Is he going to go to the dark side? And this is what keeps our interest, because is he going to manage to get through this? And then there's death and rebirth. And so it's a great scene in the Matrix movie where Neo, the hero, Mr. Smith, he can't defeat Mr. Smith, and Mr. Smith actually kills him, but he's connected by a phone line out of the Matrix back to the mothership to a girl who just happens to be named Trinity. She symbolizes grace and love and God. And she sends her love down the telephone line. She's in heaven, he's still on earth. She sends the grace down. He comes back to life. Now he's no longer working with just his own power. He's got the power of God on his side. Now he defeats the Mr. Smith, the bad man. And then the final stage of the hero's journey is you return to help others. And this whole cycle can be compressed even further, as the vast majority of times these heroes start as selfish SOBs and end up selfless people at the end. And my own life now is completely and utterly return to help others. I have no ambitions for myself anymore.
So to get to that point where we can be quite selfish at the start, and then we get to the point where actually we're selfless and we're helping others, obviously there's an organic process going on, but are we aware that we're going through this process?
The vast majority of people aren't aware of anything. They're lucky if they're aware that it's time for dinner. So self-consciousness and self-awareness is extremely rare in the human race. So first of all, there is a role for the intellect. What you and I are doing right now is primarily intellectual, right? And there is a role for the intellect, and that's to give people the context to say, listen, you may think you're doing all these other things, but what you're really trying to do, whether you realize it or not, is take the hero's journey. And and don't get sucked in. Don't think that a transformation, a condition, which is drugs or alcohol or sex, or that's going to solve that hole in your soul. That's not going to fill that hole in your soul. As a matter of fact, if you try to fill that hole in soul with donuts, you're just going to get fat. And it's not and you may think you want to get just money and power and and fame, and there a little bit of money, a little bit. There's nothing wrong with it.
Mm.
But if you think that's the answer, then you're wrong. What you're really longing for is this transformation of being.
Mm.
And what I do intellectually is I talk to people and I say, this isn't exotic stuff. If you'll stop, for example, I was a good enough salesman that, as you mentioned when you were reading, I was on the cover of Selling Magazine. And what I learned in sales is that the more I forget about myself, the more I forget about my product, the more I forget about my commissions, and the more I forget about my quota, and instead selflessly, fanatically focus on helping my customer achieve his goals, the more product I sell, the faster I make my quota.
And
so
at that point, you're selfless.
You're the more, in the same thing, people think that I want to become a leader. And when you ask them, why do you want to be? Oh, I want to get promoted. I want to make more money. I want to attract chicks. I want to, I want to buy a house, whatever. No. If you really want to be a successful leader, forget all about your own career. Forget all about, pleasing your own boss. Right. Your job as a leader is not to get promoted. It's to get other people promoted. And the more successfully you get other people raises, the more successfully you get other people promoted, the faster you'll get promoted.
So again, it's being selfless. Again, that's
your goals become the trailing indicator, the byproduct, the happy accident that comes out of it. And of course, the trick, which you have to learn in the desert, is you can't game the system. You can't help a little old lady across the street and then run back across and buy a lottery ticket, because now that you've done that, you should get this. You have.
I love the narrative, because I think we live in a world today, 2023, where I fear that not for all, but for some, the idea of becoming our own hero and being selfless has become lost to a degree. And there are people, and there is a tendency to just focus on ourselves and just put everything.
And it's not just a tendency; it's a mania.
Yeah, I kind of downplay
I consider it a mass hysteria almost.
Yeah.
I started my introduction to my latest book, Not Less Than Everything. I said, here's the 3 reasons I'm writing this book. And the first one is that I just want a rattling good spiritual adventure story. It's a lot of great stories and all kinds of crazy stuff that happened to me and wild people that I met, etc. So you'll take that ride. And along with that, what I'm really trying to do with those stories and everything is turn you on. I want to introduce you to a kind of life that is so much more rewarding than anything else you could possibly imagine. That's the spiritual life, the spiritual path, the hero's journey. The second reason I'm doing it is I want to introduce the miraculous back into spiritual conversation. It's not just superstition. Miracles happen. There is magic in the world. There is a God, and these really incredible things can happen to you if you open yourself up to them. The third reason is that we live in a very dystopic, getting back to your comment, which just came out, for example, the CDC, the Center for Disease Control here in America, just came out in February. It said 57% of teenage girls in America report being constantly sad. And 30% of teenage girls say that they're seriously have considered suicide. Every high school in America now has a suicide helpline.
And
suicide
why is that? What's the underlying cause?
I know. Give me 1 second just to lay out. So, all the young men are living in their parents' basements. They call it the failure to launch. Nobody's getting married. Nobody's having children. Everybody's on drugs. 40% of incoming freshmen at elite universities in the Western civilization are already on antidepressants. And I define this all as a spiritual crisis. It's there. We have demythologized everything. We have reduced everything to it's what it was. Oscar Wilde, that good English famous English writer, who's one of the people I'd like to meet if I had a chance.
Okay.
Who said he knows the price of everything and the value of nothing. We seem to know the price of everything, and especially in America, whatever problems can't be solved with money, could always be solved with more money. So we think money is the secret to everything. And so people are empty. I had a good friend of mine whose beautiful 15-year-old daughter, she got a call from the school. Somebody called the suicide helpline. Her name's Lily. Lily is suicidal. She goes to her 15-year-old daughter and says, is this true, Lily? And Lily says, yes. And she says, why? What is there to live for? And so we have, and the World Health Organization said, but depression is the #1 disease afflicting Western civilization. I mean, the people in Bangladesh are living on 50 cents a day, and our suicide rate is 100 times higher than theirs.
Wow, no idea.
So this guy, I quote him in my introduction to Not Less Than Everything. I said, Andrew Sullivan wrote an incredible article for New York Magazine about the opioid epidemic. And he said, if you think this is just it's beautifully written, I highly recommend, look it up. It's easy to find online. It's called
Andrew Sullivan.
Andrew Sullivan is called The Poison We Pick. And it's about the opioid epidemic. And he says, if you think this is a pharmacological problem, it's just a drug problem. He said, you're missing the despair that makes so many people want to fly away. He said, America invented modern life. Now millions of people are taking heroin to get away from it. He said, we live in a strange new world where everything is flat, where communication is virtual, and where those core elements of human happiness, faith, family, community, seem to elude so many. He said, until we reinvent our old religion, find a new way of life, he said, I'm afraid the poppy is going to flourish. And so I think all of these things, and I list about 20 of them in the introduction to my book, the loneliness epidemic, more people are living alone now than have ever lived alone before, are all symptoms of one disease, a spiritual crisis. People lack spirituality. Carl Jung's the great student of Freud and great psychiatrist said, whether God exists or not is a legitimate question. That man needs a God is an incontrovertible fact. We need something bigger than ourselves to live for.
Okay. So that I think you've just answered the question I was going to ask you. So the question I was going to ask you was around, so spirituality clearly is an absence for a lot of us, but finding our spirituality, that was the question, but I think you might have answered it.
Yeah, to me, it's the one thing that the Buddha and St. Paul both said the same thing, which is kind of interesting because supposedly the Buddha's dying words were, "Work out your own salvation," and St. Paul famously said, "Work out your own salvation in fear and trembling." And to me, I don't, I advocate the spiritual quest, and there are, that to me, the hero's journey is a map that every legitimate, authentic spiritual quest follows the lines of the hero's journey. For example, you can't say, well, because I'm going to make up a new spiritual religion that means I don't have to go to the desert. And my followers aren't going to have to go to the desert. They're not going to have to be formed. They're not going to have to work. They're not going to have to develop themselves. No, that's like saying you're going to play chess, but you're going to say the bishop can go sideways. No, the bishops can't go sideways in chess. You can't skip stages. Now, that doesn't mean we're all on the same stage at the same time. You might spend 10 years in the desert. I might spend 6 months in the desert, but everybody's got to go to the desert. Everybody's got to go be called. Everybody's going to have to struggle with resistance to the call. My book, Not Less Than Everything, has lots of cases in it where one of the big reasons I launched into MTV is I was trying to bury my spiritual past. I mean, I was so sick and tired of being alone and fighting the fight and everybody thinking I was crazy. So I plunged into MTV and I had an unlimited expense account and I was 28 years old and I'm living in New York City and I'm working for MTV, and believe me, chicks dug me. And the parties were fabulous and fantastic. And we had parties 12 times a day. And I drove around in limousines and I flew around in helicopters. But it was all attempt to blot it all out.
Okay, so if I can pause you there. So tell me about MTV how that started. What was this, early 80s?
1981, MTV launched on August 1st, 1981. And what I had been doing just previous to that, one of the things I used to do is I used to travel around the country. When I travel around the country, I was on a quest. I had a truck and I was a carpet installer, as a matter of fact, most of the time. And I used to live in the back of my truck. But I'd go to bookstores and I'd ask the owners of the bookstores, who are the coolest people in town? Who are the people that can teach me about life? And in this bookstore in Washington, D.C., I got the name Louis R. Mobley and a phone number. So I called him up and I ended up going out. He was living on an estate outside of Maryland. And it turned out he was the man who had founded the IBM Executive School. And he ran it for 10 years. And he ran it from 1956 to 1966. And he turned out all the executives that turned IBM into the most admired corporation in the world in the 60s and 70s.
So you rang him up, and did he pick up? And you said you said to come
Yeah,
out.
I rang him up and I said, listen, Lou, I said, I was in this bookstore and this woman who runs the bookstore gave me your phone number and said, you're cool and you can teach me something and you know something. He said, come on out. He's from Georgia. It was from Georgia. I ended up spending the night. And then, and he just dazzled me with everything he knew. But the reason I went looking for him, I went because he was I said, I want to find spiritual people. He was a spiritual guy who happened to have run the IBM Executive School. Okay. He wasn't an IBM executive who happened to have an interest in spirituality. This is where people get me wrong all the time. I'm not an entrepreneur who dabbles in spirituality. I'm not an author who dabbles in spirituality. Spirituality was 100% of my focus for the vast majority of my life. I dabbled in entrepreneurship. I dabble in writing. My spiritual stuff is front and center. That way it was with Lou. So about a year later, I called Lou back and I said, I got a proposition for you. I said, I know you've retired from IBM and you have a consulting business. I'm a pretty good salesman. I'll hustle you up clients for your consulting business. I don't want you to pay me. Just teach me everything you know. And he said, I'll go you one better. He said, you can move into my house with me and my family. He said, you can live in the guest house. He said, every morning you'll have your meals with the family. He said, every morning, he said, I will meet you in my study and I will tutor you one-on-one. He said, in the afternoons, you can hustle up clients for us. But I insist on one thing. I insist that we pay you. I don't want you working for free. So I moved to Maryland and moved into his house. And there's a whole chapter in my book, Not Less Than Everything, about my experiences with him. And he taught me so much. But then he got sick. And he suggested that I had to have a heart operation. And he suggested I move to New York City and work with this other protege that he had. And so I went to New York City, and the protege thing fell apart almost immediately. And I was just lost and wandering around and didn't have any money and everything. And just through some happy accidents, I ended up getting an interview with I didn't even know what cable TV was. But I ended up getting an interview with a company called Warner Amex Satellite Entertainment Company, which was a joint venture of Warner Communications and American Express. And they hired me as a salesman. And the company at that time owned the Movie Channel and Nickelodeon. And I started on January 5th, 1981. On March 15th, 1981, we had a company meeting at the Ed Sullivan Theater. And Tom Freston, who later became the CEO of MTV and CEO of Viacom, he's a good friend of mine, he got up in front of us and he said, well, guess what? On August 1, we're going to launch this new service, and it's going to be called MTV Music Television. And all of a sudden, he started showing us video music. I remember it was Robert Palmer and and some other people. And he said, it's going to be like imagine like a radio station, except it's going to show video music. And that was the birth of MTV. So I was right there at ground zero. Again, on a full expense account. I could eat anywhere. I could go to I could do anything I wanted. It was all on the company's nickel.
Which is obviously MTV is a phenomenon.
Yeah, and MTV within not even a year, MTV became a Fortune magazine named MTV the breakthrough product of the year for 1981. So the rest was history after that.
It must have been just, I guess, one last question for me on that. It must have been a pretty incredible time. I feel there must have been lots of energy, lots of
my God. Oh my God. It was, a matter of fact, I'm invited I don't know if I'm going to be able to make it, but we still stay very close. There's a dinner in a couple of weeks, as a matter of fact, in New York of XMTV people we were a real band of brothers. Of
Yeah.
all the companies I worked with, including my own company,
Mm.
I don't think I ever felt closer than I did to the people to this day. And as a matter of fact, I also just organized, or before I got on this podcast with you, a 3-day weekend with two of my friends from MTV that I'm going to do down in South Carolina. So we're still very, very close
Very,
after
very
all
close.
these years. But
Yeah.
if I can back you up 1 second, if August Turak doesn't make a decision when he's in college to go looking for the truth, he doesn't end up driving around in a truck, going to bookstores and asking people for referrals. And if he doesn't ask people for referrals, he doesn't meet Lou Mobley.
Mm.
And if he doesn't meet Lou Mobley, he never goes to New York City. And if he doesn't go to New York City, he never works for MTV. So it all starts a string of happy accidents that start with a decision that I made in college to spend my life as a spiritual seeker.
And just in relation to that, do you think today people are reluctant to make accidents, so they don't even go with our spirituality?
People want guaranteed results.
Yeah.
We live in a transactional world. I'll only do this if you promise me that.
Even if it doesn't feel right.
We love to talk about journeys into the unknown. Nobody wants to take any journeys, and they want a guaranteed result. People have become extremely conservative. College students that are extremely, compared to when I went to college, very, very, very conservative. And people are. I wrote an article for Forbes. I'm not doing it right now. But for many years, that's another happy accident. How I ended up getting this gig is after I won the Templeton Prize, I ended up sitting out in my office, and just for the heck of it, I wrote what I thought was a white paper about why the monks are so darn good at business. Why are these monks so good at business? They don't care about business. They're all 65 years old. They only work 4 hours a day. They work in silence. They work in these really mundane businesses, growing eggs and mushrooms, but everything they touch turns to gold. Why? So I wrote up what I thought was a white paper. I gave it to some friends. Next thing you know, happy accident, I get a call from the editor of Forbes magazine. Somebody gave me this thing. I love it. I want to print it, but we have to make it a 4-part article because it wasn't designed to be an article. I said, great. Yeah. I said, only thing I want to do is change the title. I said, sure. What do you want to make? He said, I want to call it Business Secrets of the Trappist Monks. I said, great. He prints it. It goes viral. And then he invites me to become a contributor to write about leadership for Forbes. So I started doing that. And the next thing you know, I get a telephone call from Columbia Business School saying, we'd like you to turn it into a book, Business Secrets of the Trappist Monks. I didn't even have an agent. I didn't have an agent or anything. All happy accidents. This stuff just keeps falling into my lap. I didn't set out to do any of this stuff. So anyway, I wrote an article for Forbes called Are You Coachable? The 5 Steps to Coachability. And I start out by talking about how my golf game, talk about a journey into the unknown. I talked about how my golf game was terrible. So I started taking golf lessons. This is back in like 1994 or something like that. And this pro was right off the tour. And he said to me, said, I want to give you an effortless, repeatable, athletic, low energy golf swing. And then he proceeds to work me so hard, I lost 20 pounds. But one day he said to me, the first time he ever said anything personally to me, he said, Augie, I like working with you. Anything you ask me I ask you to do, you give me 150%. Everybody else I teach, they give me $100 for 30 minutes, and then they argue for the entire 30 minutes. He said, they don't want to, he said, they'd rather be right than good. And I find that all the time when I'm trying to help people with my coaching or my consulting or anything, people, they don't want to listen. Mm-hmm. You got to, and the other thing, the arrogance, there's so many people. I mean, if you don't have them, if you're really serious about doing something with your life and you don't have a teacher or a mentor, you're an idiot. Mm-hmm. There's an old saying that the doctor who treats himself has a fool for a patient. And a man who is his own a spiritual teacher or a man who is his own, business mentor has a fool for a client.
Yeah.
You need a teacher. You need other people that help you, that give you feedback and provide. Is it easier to go to the gym by yourself, or is it easier to have a personal trainer and some other people that go with you?
So with that being said, the people listening, that some of those that maybe don't have mentors or coaches, so really what they should be doing is looking to reach out to people, whether it be a physical engagement, a virtual, or even if you don't have money at this point, you can follow you. You can, you've got articles, you've got books, there's things that we can do immediately to start the process. And then if you don't have the money now, then the money will come.
Exactly. And by the way, Americans at least, and I think a lot of Brits are the same way. When people want something, they find the money.
Mm.
Skip the movies and the expensive lunches and the dinners, and get yourself a personal trainer at the gym and a mentor. That's where you should be spending your money. But the other thing is, and gets back to a really good business lesson. Most people in business make the mistake of thinking tactically. And most people are the same way about their life. That's what my golf pro said. He said, people don't want to change it. They want me to give them some little fix that'll help them win a bet on Saturday, rather than take the long-term view of becoming a great golfer.
Because that might journey.
Exactly. That might take a year. Yeah. And you got to go in the desert. You got to lose 20 pounds taking golf lessons and you get blisters and everything. And on top of everything else, everything the teacher asks you to do originally feels wrong. So you have to trust him.
Yeah.
I mean, anybody who's ever tried to play golf, the very first thing they teach you is the grip. And the first time you grab hold of that golf club correctly, you think this has got to be nuts. There's no way I couldn't even hit somebody over the head holding a golf club like this, let alone hit a golf club. But you work at it until it becomes second nature. Now I can't imagine holding a golf club any other way.
And it's like the idea of things feeling uncomfortable and stuff. Like when you go to the gym, if you haven't been to the gym for 12 months and we go to the gym, particularly if you've got a trainer, it's going to feel, our body the next day or the day after is not going to feel great.
Really good point. And let's add to that. What people are mostly afraid of in personal development and all this stuff, the reason why you feel bad is because you take one step forward by going to the gym and then you tear muscles down.
Yeah.
So you go backwards for a day or two, you're actually weaker than you were until these muscles come back. So you got to be willing to get worse before you get better. There's great stories in golf about great Nick Faldo, who's
great golfer.
Who's English. Yeah, I love Sir Nick Faldo.
Sir Nick. Sorry, Nick. Sorry, Nick.
Sir Nick was back in the 1990s. He was an excellent golfer, making a lot of money, but he couldn't win. And he goes down to Florida, and he trusts this guy down there. His name is David Ledbetter.
I remember the name.
David Ledbetter tore his swing down to where he couldn't break 100. And there's always the fear that if you let something get broken down until you can't break 100, how do you know you'll ever get back at all? Even back to where you were when you started. But he had the faith, and Mafaldo came back and he won all these masters and he won all these great, and that's how he became Sir Nick. So you have to be willing to get worse before you get better. If you get treated for cancer, you may feel fine. You go to the doctor and he says, you got this tumor. So you got to trust the doctor, right? Yeah. And then the doctor says, we're going to treat this darn tumor with this thing called chemotherapy. And you feel 20,000 times worse than you did when you came. But you got to be willing to feel worse before you get better. So a lot of times when you're being trained by a teacher, they're asking you to do things that don't feel natural in the beginning. They have to become second nature. And then you end up having what we talk about in spirituality as an epiphany, like me with my golf pro. One day you're working at it, suddenly the ball starts going in the right. Oh, now I see what he was trying to tell me for the last 6 months.
Yeah.
And he was right.
I remember when many moons ago when I went skiing at school. I think it was skiing or snowboarding. I think it was snowboarding. But I was falling over all the time. Actually, sorry, it was skiing. It's that long ago that I can't remember. It was skiing. But I was falling over and over again. But it's a very mechanical process. And then all of a sudden, I could ski. But I had 4 days of continually falling down, and it felt uncomfortable. And I was using muscles in my body that I hadn't ever used, and it was. But I trust, to your point, having a coach. I trusted the coach because they knew a lot better than me. They knew that the mistakes and the falling down, everything I was doing, they'd seen it probably thousands of times before, and people would I guess ultimately have the same experience as me. You would fall down for 3 or 4 days, and then all of a sudden you'd be able to ski at a very basic level, and then as you go on, you just improve.
Right. Which gets back to my other point. Most people have a tactical approach. I want to lose 10 pounds in the next 2 months. I want to be able to, you have to have a strategic vision. What is your big picture? And in business, we talk about the mission.
Mm-hmm.
What is the mission of the organization? And so I say to people, how are you going to, as a business executive, how are you going to help create a mission that other people can buy into, something that is so wonderful and so higher that people are going to get excited about it and buy into and be willing to serve it selflessly.
Mm.
If you don't have a mission for your own life, what is your mission for your life? I don't want to know what you want to get done in the next 3 weeks or what you got on your to-do list for tomorrow. I want to know why you're on the planet. What's your excuse for taking up space? What is your mission? Mobley drilled into my head. He said, the most important question that the top leadership has to answer is, what is the business of the business? What business are we really in? And more often than not, you find out that businesses that fail because they define the business too narrowly.
Really?
Yes. So they define, word perfect was the number one word processing package, but they thought they were in the word processing business. Microsoft realized they were in the office business, and word processing became a feature in a much larger product called Office, and they put Word Perfect and WordStar and all these companies out of business. So
if it's too narrow, then you don't have that growth potential.
What is your strategic vision? What is the business? So what is the business of the business? Why do we get up out of bed and come here every morning? We could go a lot of different places, but why do we come here? What are we trying to accomplish? What are we really about? And it can't just be making money. It's got to be something bigger than that. Now, I take that. So when Mobley was telling me about that, I was very much into the question, who am I? Because the question of who am I is, what is the business of me? Why do I get out of bed in the morning? What am I trying? Who am I? So what is the business of the business is a way of collectively asking, who are we? Who are we? And the spiritual correspondence to that is, who am I? Who am I? What is my purpose? Why am I here? Where did I come from? Where am I going? Does life make sense? These are the bigger questions. And the more and most people are terrified to spend time, even in business. People don't want to spend time on strategic things because they're too busy. I'm too busy. I got 100 emails. How can I spend time thinking about where we're going to be a year from now or 2 years from now when I got emails I got to answer right now? These are people that get nowhere in life. They think that being busy is the way to.
So for people listening, so I'm keen because there's lots of amazing stuff here. So for people listening, that maybe this isn't a practice that they're accustomed to. So obviously they can start now, but what should they be doing in order to kind of build this into their daily, weekly, monthly, yearly regimen?
Well, one of the things where you really have to have faith, which is creativity. First of all, creativity is actually essential, right? And creativity is the ability to think with analogies. And I could write some articles, maybe I will write some articles eventually, about how I solve business problems with examples from Russian history, or how I solved a really difficult business problem because I used the analogy to MacArthur's and how MacArthur the Incheon move that he made in the Korean War. So Lou Mobley used to drill into my head that all great leaders that he met at IBM and these other corporations were generalists, not specialists. They read widely and omnivorously. They were interested in everything. And this has become more and more important because who knows, when a butterfly flaps his wings in darkest Africa, it might put your business out of business because everything is so interconnected. So you have to have omnivorous curiosity, and you feed that curiosity. You don't think to yourself, well, I'm reading Moby Dick right now. Well, what is Moby Dick? How's this going to help me tomorrow? You know, I have all kinds of examples for how the fact that I remember one time I was dealing with a guy from Turkey who was, everybody told me this guy's a real tough SOB, and you really can't deal with this guy. He's very successful and he's arrogant, blah, blah, blah. And so I started talking to him, and the next thing you know, I mentioned the Ottoman Emperor Suleiman the Magnificent, and a bunch of other stuff about the Ottoman Empire and Ottoman history from the 1500s. And he says, "You know Suleiman the Magnificent?" I said, "Yeah." And I started talking more about it. He says, he turned around to all his people. He said, "I have been in America for 20 years. This is the first man I've met who can spell the word turkey. I will do business with you."
So was that tactical? So when you
No, that wasn't tactical, because I read about Suleiman 15 years earlier.
Okay.
And it only came around and helped me out 15 years later when I never expected. It was a happy accident. So when I was reading Suleiman, I was reading it strategically, because I was reading, all of the reading that I've done is, again, let's remember what I set out to be when I was 18. How can I be the best person I can be? And having as much knowledge as I can is one way that can help that process. So I had a strategic reason for my reading. Curiosity, love of learning, just wanting to be the best person I could be. And then it just so happens that it ends up paying off. And I'll give you the classic example. Was I spent 4 years at the University of Pittsburgh. I think I got my Pitt hat on right now, studying Russian history. And oh my God, what are you going to do with it? What are you going to do with it? Everybody I met, what are you going to do with Russian history? But first thing, though, I will say, this is something from my childhood. I was walking with a graduate student one time. I never met him before. I never saw him again. I don't know why I was walking with him. And he asked me when I was majoring, and I said, Russian history. And he said, "What are you going to do with it?" And I said, "What are you going to do?" And I felt like saying, "I'm going to shove it up, where." But I said, "I don't know. I guess I'll be a Russian history professor or something." And he said, do you know how many jobs for Russian history professors open up in America in a year? And I said, "I have no idea." He said, "Maybe 3. And I said, "Great, that's 2 more than I need." So you got to have that attitude. I've always had that kind of an attitude.
I wouldn't have thought about that. So, but I'm glad that you've given me a glimpse into the sort of responses we can deliver.
I was when I won a prep school scholarship when I was 14. I came from a very lower middle class family. We were a family of 10 living in a 900 square foot house, and I won this scholarship to go to this elite prep school up in New England with families, the DuPonts and the Fords and all these super rich kids. And I'd never been out of Pittsburgh in my life. And my dad drove me up to Connecticut to start. And my dad was a very well-educated man, but he was intimidated as I look back. And he said, "I hope these boys like you." And I was only 14 years old. I said, "No, Dad, I hope I like them." So that part is key. But what happened was that in 1999, I had built up these 2 software companies. And one day, a man came in from Israel, who wanted our company to sell his products. And I had told through my chief operating officer that I wasn't interested unless we could get equity. And he was flying from Tel Aviv, Israel to New York, and he had business in New York. And then he was going to Silicon Valley for more business. He took a detour and came down here in North Carolina just to talk to me. So I wasn't even eager to talk to him. This was just all right, I'll be nice. I'll see you. He walked into my office, and the first thing he saw was a book was on my desk upside down. And it was a book of short stories by the Russian author, Anton Chekhov. And the first thing this man ever said to me was, "My God, you're reading Chekhov?" And I said, "Yeah." I said, "I studied Russian history and I love Russian literature, and I read Dostoevsky and Tolstoy and Turgenev and Gogol and all those guys, He said, but I am Russian. And
Oh,
I
wow,
said,
wow, wow.
well, здравствуйте, как вы поживаете? Which means hello, how are
So
you?
you speak Russian as well?
Well, I'm not fluent in it, but I knew
Okay,
enough. I know
okay,
enough
but
to
you
be
understand.
dangerous.
Okay,
So I just said, hello, how are you?
yeah.
Здравствуйте, как вы поживаете? And so he ended up sitting down, and he only had an hour and a half or something like that to catch his next plane. And we spent the whole hour and a half talking about Russia and about Russian literature and about Russian history and about Russian philosophy and all this stuff. And so by the end of that, we're the best buddies. So I drive him to the airport. We get to the airport. He says, we haven't done any business. He said, I'm going to be in New York next week. Why don't you fly up and we'll talk business? I said, okay. So I flew up to New York the following week. I go into his hotel, into his suite. For the next 3.5 hours, we talk about Russia and all this different stuff. And he finally leans back like this and he starts laughing. And I said, what are you laughing? His name was Lev. He's still a good friend of mine, as a matter of fact. And I said, what are you laughing? He said, it's 3 hours and we still haven't said a word about business. I said, yeah, you're right. He said, I have a better idea. Why don't we just buy your company? And that's how I sold my company.
Okay.
So a week later, 2 weeks later, me and my partners are on flying first class to Israel. They put on the dog, everything for 3 days and 3 nights. We just put on the dog. We worked out a deal. We sold the company to them for a lot of cash and a lot of stock. And we closed on March 31st of 2000. 6 weeks later, the .com blew up. My company wouldn't have been worth 10 cents on a dollar.
How many weeks later?
Like 6 weeks. The March 31st is when we closed on the deal. Roughly June 15th is when the .com collapse happened.
Okay.
And then about 5 years later, my brother lives here with me. I was working on my first book, and he came down in the morning and he said, I have two pieces of really good news for you. I said, what? And he said, number one, the Carolina Hurricanes hockey team won last night. He's a fanatic hockey fan. He said, the number two is, he said, BMC Software just bought our company for $150 million in cash. So we got bought out the second time for a lot of money, all because I studied Russian history.
So you had two businesses. So just reframing. So you got the first business, the Lev purchased.
No, he bought both businesses.
So he bought both.
He bought both. The first business was called Raleigh Group International, and we started out as a distributor. We were selling other people's software because we're really good at sales. And so it's called Raleigh Group International. And the issue that we had with that is we were so good at sales that we would run these other companies' sales up through the moon, and then they would get acquired. And then they'd send us a bottle of champagne and congratulations, thank you so much. And they would get the millions of dollars. So we said, wait a second, we got to start selling our own products. What we did was we were selling software developers tools. So we were selling highly technical tools that software developers use to write more software.
Yeah.
And so we started a second company. It was called Elsinore Technologies, named after, getting back to the United Kingdom again.
Say that again, sorry.
Our company. Here's a riddle for you. We called it Elsinore Technologies, and it's got an English tie-in. Why? Because Hamlet's castle was Elsinore.
Okay.
Shakespeare. So we called it Elsinore Technologies. Is another way where my wide education came in handy. And so we started building our own software within Elsinore. And so we would sell it through our own sales force, but we'd also sell it in other ways. And those were the two companies, Raleigh Group International and Elsinore Technologies. And the company in Russia and Israel was called Mutech. And they bought both of our companies, but then they changed the name to the new combined company to Identify Software. It was called Identify Software. And about 5 years later, Identify was sold to BMC for $150 million. Gosh. So happy accidents, all happy accidents.
All happy accidents, all happy accidents. So your book, two questions. One, where can people find your book?
All right. So the difficult thing is you can find it. The best place for, you're in England, and I don't know where most of your subscribers are. If you're in America, you can, first of all, you can all come to my website, which is
I'll put a link to your website on the show notes.
www.augustturak.com.
Yeah.
So my name is August, like the month, T as in Tom, Urak. And you can come to augustturak.com and you'll find a lot of my Forbes articles there. You can also go to forbes.com and pump in August Turak, and all of my articles will my book, my books are available there. We're actually running a special right now on Not Less Than Everything, which is my book that is just released. It's only been out 2 weeks. One Man's Quest for Spiritual Enlightenment, for 50% off. But we're not selling it internationally, because by the time you pay the shipping to go to England, it's too expensive.
But if you're in the US and you're listening to this, they can take advantage.
Exactly. And if you're not in the US, then my recommendation is to go to Amazon. And right now, Amazon is offering Not Less Than Everything, One Man's Quest for Spiritual Enlightenment, for 99 cents. So I don't know what 99 cents would be in English money, but it's not much.
That's 70p, something like that.
Yeah, 70p, something like that. So you can get that, and you can download that electronically. You can also download it electronically by coming to my website, augustturak.com. And so, and if you have any problem with Amazon, come to augustturak.com and let me know that you're having trouble, and we will get you the electronic version also for 99 cents or 60p or whatever you said it would be.
Okay. Well, we can put all the links on the show notes, so it's easy for people to access, so no problem.
Yeah, right. So and my brother John, monk, A Pilgrim of the Purpose of Life, is also available, and soon we will have a Audible version. So I've read the book, and we're in the final production stages of being able to listen to yours truly, my mellifluous voice, reading my own book, business. So I read Business Secrets of the Trappist Monks. You can get that through Audible. You can get Brother John, A Monk, A Pilgrim, and the Purpose of Life, through Audible. And soon we'll have an audio version of Not Less Than Everything, One Man's Quest for Spiritual Enlightenment. Okay. But if you're really looking for just an exciting, I've been getting great feedback. I just got it. Somebody I don't know sent me a text yesterday saying he was halfway through Not Less Than Everything. He said, and the suspense is killing me. Yeah. So it's a really good, rattling good adventure story with a very uplifting ending to it, but it also doesn't pull any punches. There's no shortcuts. If you want to be, it's like anything in life. If you want to be great in anything, you got to be willing to put the work in.
And this book really encapsulates that. So if you're if we're struggling and we are confused about how we can become great and what the journey looks like, what we need to do, this is really something they need to
absolutely. And actually, it's kind of a bookends, because this Not Less Than Everything is my spiritual memoir of all the things I did on a personal basis spiritually. But Business Secrets of the Trappist Monks, that was published by Columbia Business School, actually illustrates, in each chapter, it says, here's a virtue that the monks use in order to be successful in their business. I tell a story. It's all stories, not lecturing. And then on the bottom, it says, here's how I took that exact same virtue. What I like, in a lot of ways, the best thing I like about my first book, Business Secrets of the Trappist Monks, is that it really takes care of the objection that I hear a lot. Oh yeah, that would work for the monks because they have free labor and they don't have to worry about this and any other thing, but it wouldn't work in the real world. Well, I show you how I used the Trappist business model, to take $2,500 in 1993 and turn it into millions of dollars by 2000.
Which is phenomenal.
In 7 years, as I told you earlier.
So that piece, because we're getting towards the end now. So before we hit the record button, you were kind of telling me this story, and you were telling me about, because I was just $2,500. That's all you used for start your business, and then you sort of were giving me an account of what you did to keep on going month after month, month after month. If you can maybe relay that for me and everybody else.
Well, first of all, the reason why I started with 3 other guys, 4 of us, and we were all spiritual. And we wanted to build a spiritual company. Now, a spiritual company didn't mean that we weren't going to care, about profits or anything. It just meant that we were going to do this for higher purpose than just making money. We were going to do some, and in other words, we took on a business not as something where you have spirituality over here and you have business over here. No, this was going to be a spiritual exercise. So we came up with first of all, we had no idea what we were going to do. And my partner, Dave Gold, said, our business plan will be, we're smart guys, we'll figure out something to do. So that was our business plan.
Yeah.
But we also put down on a back of an envelope the values we believed in. And we said, we're going to have a back against the wall mentality. We're going to help each other, but everybody's got to pull their own weight. So we had, we're going to be cooperative. We're going to be communicating, there's no excuses, all these things that and so we said, we're going to put $2,500 in. And Dave Gold and I were both well off. I had a successful business career with companies like MTV and what's now the A&E network, et cetera. And he had been a lawyer. So we both had money, but we said, we don't want this to become a vanity company where you just keep putting money in every month just so you can have a business card that says you're CEO. No, we're going to have 1 month, $2,500. And I told you the reason why it turned out to be $2,500, that's how much it cost to rent an office, get phones installed, heating, air conditioning, some pens and pencils. It cost us $2,500. And then we said, if we're really serious, if we're as good as we think we are, if we're as good as we think we need to be, we'll be able to make $2,500 doing something in the first month. And that will pay the second month's bills. And if we ever don't make our number, we close the business. We won't ever put another dime in this business. We just to make it interesting, this was intentional. We didn't take investors. We didn't borrow money. We made it as hard on ourselves as we possibly could be because we wanted this to be our desert. Yeah. This was going to be the thing. This was going to be the steamy cauldron, the fiery furnace that was going to tell us whether are we as good as we think we are? Are we as sincere as do we believe in what we preach? We'll find out. We want to find out. And so we bootstrapped it on internally generated cash, month after month after month, little by little. Even 6 months later, I can remember like it was yesterday. In January, we started in August of 1993. Our total revenue in January of 1994 was $8,000. February was $11,000. March was these are actual numbers. I remember them. March was $14,000. April was $19,000. I can't remember after that.
What were you guys doing?
In the beginning, we would do anything. I ended up working for minimum wage on weekends, setting up appointments for Sears home burglar alarms. For minimum wage on a telephone, I'd call everybody on the street saying, we got a salesman coming over to your house to tell you how much it's going to cost for a burglar alarm. We did anything. We practically cleaned toilets. I had been at that time in the late 80s, I had a job where I was making $60,000 a month.
Wow.
And here I am working in 1993 for minimum wage. But but when you got a back against the wall mentality, you do what you got to do. What happened then was one of my college students, another happy accident, one of my college students, because I was volunteering to help mentor college students on a volunteer basis. I didn't get paid. They didn't get credit on spiritual issues. And one of my college students and another couple of guys started a software company called One Tree Software. And it was a version control package designed to help software programmers keep from overwriting each other so that everybody could stay on the same, and he told me about it. And I said, well, we're pretty good at sales. He said, okay, if you guys want to sell our product, we'll give you 40% off on the price. And that's it. So we started cold calling and we started selling their product. And every time we sold it, they got 60%, we got 40%. And we kept building that up. Then we added another product, then we added another product, then we added another product. And eventually we got to the point where we decided if we really wanted to make some money, we had to start making our own products. So then we started the second company, Elsinore Technologies, to start the other, but we just started from absolute scratch.
So happy accidents.
the happy accident was because that was the other thing. I was always volunteering with these college students, and especially my father and all the other people I knew from New York. What are you doing that? Are you getting paid? Are you on the faculty there? Are you able to put anything on your resume? How's that helping you out?
Yeah.
You go over there to work with these college students. They're just a bunch of snot-nosed kids. They probably don't appreciate what you're doing. And all these things came out of it. I won the Templeton Prize because of my college students. My company got started because of my college students. Then in 2009, this is the last story I'll tell you. Then in 2009, I got a telephone call from one of my Duke students. I hadn't talked to him in 7 or 8 years. He said, we've started a company in New York called Yext. And we just got started and we're having trouble with sales. Can you help us out? So I fly up to New York and they're living right in a Columbus Circle and they're in a loft and there's maybe 25 people in the company. And they said, we need your help. And I said, oh yeah, service and selflessness, I'll help you out. Well, we can't pay you. And I said, well, just pay my expenses because I believe in this service and selflessness stuff, and give me some stock. So I worked there 3 months and they gave me a big giant wad of stock. They paid my expenses and I went home. I may have worked 4 months and I came home here to North Carolina. I thought, well, they're good guys and they're smart guys and I'm glad I helped out, but this stock will probably be never worth anything, but I'm glad I did it anyway. 5 years later, they go public for 1.2 billion. The stock goes to $28 a share. 4 months, I made millions of dollars for 4 months work. Why?
The mind boggles.
Because I volunteered with all these snot-nosed kids back in 2000. Because when they needed me to help them for nothing, I did it. Happy accidents, selflessness.
Yeah. I've learned a lot. So I've learned a lot even before we hit the record button, but there's been bumbles that I've got beyond this. So
where do I send my bill?
Actually, yes, happy act. I'm hoping I get one of these happy accents. Maybe it's been another one of those happy accents.
No, actually, I believe that you've done me a wonderful favor being on your show. I've really enjoyed it. You're really sharp. You ask the right questions, great questions. The thing I like about you the most, though, is you're really interested in what you're doing. It's amazing how many times I get interviewed and the person's kind of just going through the motions because it's their job to interview me, and so they just kind of. But you have a real enthusiasm for what you're doing and for what you're trying to help people with, and I really appreciate that.
Well, it's like that mission-based stuff, and it's my journey to becoming my own hero. So I identify with a lot of what you said. I couldn't have articulated it the way you did, but it kind of resonates with me.
And also, you have an amazingly cool English accent. I really wish I had an English accent.
Well, it's funny because whenever I hear an American's accent, I love their accent.
It always cracks me up is when I watch and people tell me the same thing when they're watching American TV, but when I'm watching British television, which I like to do, they'll have these English actors who are playing Americans.
Yeah.
And they're trying to do the American accent and they're almost there.
Yeah.
They're almost there, but they always put a little bit too much nose into it, Remember that?
Yes,
do you remember that? That movie what was it? Bridget, all those Bridget movies.
Zellweger.
That
it will come to me in a minute.
Renee Zellweger was in,
yeah.
And I don't know if you've ever seen the movies, but I've read about it. And they said that even English people said she nailed the accent. She had to learn that accent for the movie, and they said she actually nailed it. You really couldn't even tell that she wasn't English when listening to her. Yeah, that's pretty cool.
I can't believe I can't remember the movie.
I know this is all ridiculous. I'm taking up your time with this ridiculous stuff. But
no.
I was over in the time when I was over in London. And a good friend of mine from MTV, his wife was doing she's an artist, and she was the artist in residence for the Duke of Rothschild's estate.
Yeah.
And we had a big party out there and everything. Anyway, and they had it catered. And I met this girl, this English girl, who was a waitress at the event, and she ended up coming here to America, and being a intern. I have a nonprofit corporation, so she worked for Alyssa. And her name was Sarah Herbert. I guess it's still Sarah Herbert. I haven't talked to her for a while. But what cracked me up about Sarah was that Sarah's mother was American. So Sarah's normal accent was a very, very strong, nice English accent, But when she wanted to be her mother, she could turn it on.
Yeah.
And she'd start talking like her mother. And I always thought that was hilariously funny. So she could flip back and forth between her mother's American accent.
Sadly, I don't have that skill set. Maybe I don't have it yet. Maybe in the future it may come.
But all Americans think people who speak with a really good English accent are smarter than.
Sometimes it can be deceptive, though. You probably know that because you've worked and lived in England, so you probably know that.
Oh yeah, I'm sure there's a few dummies.
Yeah.
My mother used to say, "There's more horses' asses in the world than there are horses."
Yeah. I haven't heard of that one. Maybe I'll borrow that one.
Well, thank you very much. I've enjoyed every moment of being with you today.
We've got one more question.
Sure.
So the last question is: if you could invite 3 inspirational people for dinner, who would you invite?
Yes. Well, first of all, I think I would have to invite Herman Melville, the guy who wrote Moby Dick.
Okay.
And I think, oh God, this is a tough question because I'd love to invite Dostoevsky, the Russian author Dostoevsky. And then I have to throw a philosopher in there. And the guy that keeps coming into my head is Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor. Yeah. Marcus Aurelius. Now there are 3 people that are dead. I told you before the show started that what I really want to do is invite 3 beautiful women, but that
can be our next.
That would be our next.
We should have another conversation, and I think maybe that can be the next one.
But there's so many, any of the wisest men that have lived that that could teach me something, would be fascinating people to talk to, because to me the highest joy. And that's why it's been such a pleasure talking to you today, because my highest pleasure in life right now is good conversation. And it's really hard to find, especially in America. When I'm traveling in Europe, the funny thing is I get the same question a lot. What is with you Americans and chit chat? Americans, oh my God, you try to get away from chit chat and you're done.
Right, but I know I've really enjoyed this. And what we'll have to do it over a pint in England sometime.
Absolutely. And I'd love to come back on if you want me.
Totally. I think we'll do numerous conversations. I think the value that I've got, that everybody's got that's listening, has been off the chart. So I've got so many takeaways.
Before we go, I'll make one last recommendation to you and to your listeners. An article that I wrote for Forbes, which I liked when I wrote it, but I had no idea it would go viral, and it became extremely, extremely successful. And it encapsulates a lot of the ideas that we've talked about today. It's called What Every Leader Must Know About Personal Development. What every leader must know about personal development.
I'll find it and I'll put it in the show notes.
It'll be easy. It's easy to find. And if you can't find it, contact me through Heather, and we can even send it to you. Okay. But I have your email address. I might even have Melissa send it to you. What every leader must know about personal development. What
I will do, I'll look for it, and if I can't find it, I'll drop you.
Just send me an email. Send me an email.
I'll shoot you an email, and we will be talking again. We're definitely going to have more conversations.
God bless you, my friend.
Thank you so much. It's been amazing talking to you.
I've been gobsmacked. Cheerio.
Cheerio. And before you go, I just say goodbye to everybody that's watching, listening, that has taken huge amounts from August, as I have. So thank you all for tuning into this episode of My Perfect Failure. We're always looking to grow the show, so please do share this episode far and wide, particularly if you know people that are looking for higher purpose and need to know how to get to that next phase of their life, and if they're struggling. And your feedback is most welcome. We're keen to hear about the things you like, but equally the things you don't like. So you can find me at paul@myperfectfailure.com, or you can find me via the contact page on the website. So take care for now. Bye.
Thanks for listening to My Perfect Failure podcast. Be sure to visit www.myperfectfailure.com to join the conversation. Subscribe to our podcast on iTunes or Google Play. Look out for our next episode.